Welcome to another episode of Things You Can't Afford to Skip in Your Training. This is the Christmas edition. As you might be able to tell, me and my wife take the holiday season a little more seriously than the average household. So it was important for me to do something a little bit more festive a couple days out from the big day. We're going to cover two different things. One is the best prescription for strength, which is going to actually help your ability to produce force and to move more weight, specifically in a squat. The other is going to be best for growth and general development, which is also essential to strength. So regardless of which one is your goal, they both improve your capacity to increase the other. So they both have to be taken seriously. The first thing we're going to cover is strength, because let's face it, that's what most of us care about. That is paused and dead stop work. I am a big fan of this. Anybody that has ever taken me up on my coaching or my templates has seen this in their programs. Pausing and doing bottom up work does so much for your squat. It reinforces technique. It forces you to strain at your absolute weakest position. And it provides a very specific neurological stimulus because you're eliminating stretch reflex. So more stress is put directly on your nervous system, and that increases rate of force development, which is the rate at which you can produce force. It's one thing to be very strong in that you can kind of muster force over a period of time. There's certainly lifters like this. I think of them like Toe Mater, like a rusted work truck with a slow, grindy winch. We want to be able to produce a lot of force to get to that top end of force production very quickly, and dead stop work is a good way to do that. So the three most accessible ways you're going to do this: bottom up squats are really good. That's where you set the bar at the bottom of the pins, you crawl under it. It's extremely awkward. It's really difficult to find exactly where the handle is. You're going to go to push up and you're going to realize that you tend to push in the wrong direction. It takes a little while to get right. And every time you come down, you let it settle, you let the weight release on the pins, and you repeat, accelerating through as quickly as you can. Box squats are another great one. And there's some different ways you can approach box squats depending on if you want to focus on technique for your particular squat style or overload. And then pause squats. Pause squats are the easiest way to incorporate this into your training. There is no extra setup. You don't have to crawl under the bar. You don't have to grab a box. You don't have to change what you do. You just sit down into the bottom position, hold it for at least a 2 count, and then fire up as quickly as you can. Now, pause squats are great because they're the easiest way to apply this developmental stress to your competitive technique. You just squat exactly the way that you typically do, and that allows you to generate more force over time as you adapt to that in your specific powerlifting setup. So high bar squatters that are used to getting a ton of rebound, that really just bounce out of the hole and utilize that to their benefit in a meet, this is going to add something to that because you're going to be used to relying on that stretch reflex. By taking it away, that's a stimulus you're not used to. That extra neurological adaptation is going to make your bounce so much more vicious and aggressive. It's also going to expose you to more tension right out of the hole, where you typically have a lot of momentum. Going from a dead stop forces you to grind through each step of that movement, and that makes you stronger at those positions where you may be inclined to experience a stick point. Now, to refine your competitive technique, you're not going to change anything. You're just going to squat the way you normally do. But to utilize overload, and there is a big, again, there's a neurological stress, big potential for overload, specifically if you go a little wider and a little higher than normal. I don't necessarily recommend doing West Side style squats unless you are an equipped lifter and that's how you do it. Box squats can absolutely be done with a narrow stance. They can absolutely be done more in a traditional squatting style. But for overload, going a little wider and squatting a little above parallel actually provides a huge stimulus, makes your hips generally stronger. I found that to carry over to my deadlift. Just be aware where the depth is and how it corresponds to your actual squatting depth. It's really easy to convince yourself you're going lower on box squats than you actually might be going, and you can get kind of a false sense of strength. But take it for what it's worth. For going a little bit higher, watch how strong you are, how quickly you leap off the box in the beginning. As time goes on, you're going to notice you break a little bit quicker. It's a little snappier. That's going to mean you are stronger. Your hips are producing more force, and that makes you better at everything. You also want to use compensatory acceleration here. Again, this is neurological stimulus, conditioning that rate of force development. So you want to practice breaking that dead stop as hard and as quick as you can and accelerating through to build momentum. That's the habit that you want to pick up. It is no different than breaking a deadlift from the ground. Nobody wants to pull a slow, grindy, labored deadlift. They want to break it off the ground fast. And regardless of your setup, that's what you should be training to do. So you want to be able to overcome the inertia of the weight, and you want to be able to pick up momentum as quick as possible. That is going to make you faster, make you stronger, make you more effective with heavier loads. A couple things to consider for box squats. I don't recommend people rocking. That's the first thing you see is guys kind of sitting on the box, sitting back, and then running forward and coming up. That's not to say you can't get a worthwhile training stimulus doing that, but that is less like what you are going to do in an actual squat. So carryover isn't going to be as obvious there. I recommend coming down completely vertically, relaxing your hip flexors, maybe even by picking your heels up off the ground, and then slamming through and firing up as quick as you can. You're gonna notice that's a much harder, more labored break, but that is where the adaptation comes from. So the better you get at that, the more transfer you're gonna see to your actual squat. Now, this other thing that you can't afford to skip in your squatting training is better for growth. This is for more muscular development, shoring up weak areas, making sure that all of the movers and stabilizers get developed in a symmetrical fashion so that you have less points of inefficiency, less potential weak points that are going to sideline your training. So leg presses, and I'm dead serious about this. This is something that has become trendy for strength athletes, anybody involved in anything functional involving a barbell or free weights. It's become trendy to look down on typical gym bodybuilding machines as being somehow obsolete or not worthy of time and attention. And of course, it's because the average trainee that fixates on leg pressing has never been in a squat rack. So you get that kind of worst case scenario, somebody that does just machine work and does it poorly and inconsistently, being the person that gives a bad rap to all of these things that are extremely useful tools that some of the biggest and strongest people in history have utilized to get that way. Leg presses, in addition to just about every accessory unilateral isolation work that you might do, is amazing for growth in the lower body, and it addresses things that become problems when you just do barbell work. Now, obviously, you can focus on a barbell-specific training program. You can be a hyper-specific powerlifter. However, barbell work is limited. So how far you get with that, I strongly believe, is going to be dependent on genetic factors that you cannot train for. Everybody has it in their best interest to assume that they are not that person and to do as many things as they can to pump their numbers up. And that includes focusing on hypertrophy specific work using different movements. So utilizing these different elements is going to give you the opportunity to work from more angles. So you're going to hit different parts of the musculature that might not get hit. Remember, how any one person develops from a particular lift depends on their leverages, their build, how they move through the movement. So somebody with, say, very long femurs who has to bend over quite a bit when they squat, it's a different developmental stress than someone like me who has very short, stocky legs and can stay very upright. So we want to have more control over exactly how we develop, and we do that by giving ourselves more tools, not less. Now, of course, squatting should be the center focus of your training. This is not to tell anybody to replace their squatting with leg presses or hack squats or anything like that. This is supplementary. This is done after, maybe even on a second day where you can give this stuff more attention. But you're getting more control over how your quads develop, your glutes, your hamstrings, all the main movers that eventually tend to be limited by other factors. Now, the thing is, this is really more important for advanced squatters. As you become a more advanced squatter, all the different qualities you have that make you a good squatter, whether it's your hip strength, your quadricep strength, how rigid your midsection is, how good your brace is, how good your technique is, all those things are in an arms race and they're getting more and more even because you're always going to be limited by your weakest point, which means there's a cap on how your strongest points develop. Everything ends up catching up and being kind of even. So in your squat training, you can just as much be limited by something like your upper back or midsection's ability to handle the weight or to last through a really hard set, as you could potentially be limited by your main mover's ability to actually extend the joints through the range of motion. So advanced squatters need tools in their back pocket to be able to work around that. So your upper back, your midsection gets very strong over time. That becomes a staple in your squatting. You want to be able to do leg work that doesn't have to tax those structures. It's a benefit to you if you can grow your legs, if you can get your quads, your glutes, your hamstrings thicker without adding up more stress that is going to eventually pull away, not just from your squatting, but from deadlifts and other activities that you do throughout the week. Now, all of these things, they allow for more direct local fatigue on the movers, and that's what we're interested in. It takes everything above the waist out of the equation. Think about the tempo on a really hard set of squats. First of all, let's assume that any of you even go to double digits on your squat work. Very, very few people do. So that by default is a stress that you're not putting on your lower body nearly as frequently. But even when you do, it's usually paced, it's usually broken up. You can recover at the top of a squat. So that means your default setting with your rep work involves breaks in between. So it turns into more of a series of singles than an actual set of multiple reps. Well, when you do a leg press, when you do a hack squat, when you do a leg extension, a lunge, a step up, any of these other supplementary smaller movements, you are going to be able to move at a faster tempo. So you're going to be able to accumulate fatigue faster. There's also going to be less interference from technical limitations or supportive musculature. So that means when you're gassed out from squatting and you can't do any more meaningful work with that movement, you can switch to something that's less taxing, that doesn't rely on your midsection or your upper back. It doesn't rely on you being systemically fresh to last through, and you can continue stressing these muscles that might have more in the tank. They might not have been sufficiently stressed to grow. And I'm telling you, you guys that make it a priority to incorporate things like belt squats, even Smith machine work, because you're stable, you have a rigid frame to push against, you don't have to worry about balance quite as much. And that gives you something, a little something extra that kind of grounds you and makes it much easier to run into the weeds and to get to that level of fatigue that is going to hit your legs and hit your hips in a way that free weight squatting can, especially as you get more advanced. So these are great things to have in your back pocket. I advocate for people to use a variety of exercises, learn how to make a lot of different things grow you. And when you find out how to combine those, how to keep the really effective, overloaded skill-based barbell movements at the forefront while shoring up your weaknesses with stuff like this, the growth you experience is going to be absolutely nasty. So I hope you appreciate this stocking stuffer of an episode. Let me know what you think in the comments. Have you utilized any of these? Do you think any of this is bunk and that I have it backwards? Let me know what you think. Better yet, take it to Patreon where I upload my training daily with commentary so you can see how I put these principles into practice in real time. Thanks so much for watching, guys, and Merry Christmas. Until next time, this is Bromley. I'll see you.